Nicole here from moderncosmic.com. Thought I'd do something a little different today and do a little bit of forecasting. So let's talk about where we've been in October. The month of October has been one where we've had a lot of the personal planets. We've had Venus and Mars and Jupiter have all been, for the most part, in Virgo for the month, most of the month of October. This would have given, a focus on detailed work and studying, not particularly romantic placement for Venus and Mars, because Virgo is sort of the homework zodiac sign. It's the part of the zodiac that has to do with your duties and getting things done that on a day-to-day basis that feels sort of like habits, and it's your health and it's work. It's homework. So not necessarily a super romantic, pleasurable, I guess, Venus and Mars placement. Unless you're someone like myself, an astrologer, or someone who loves analysis. This is a great month for studying, for analysis, for detailed work, but not a super romantic month, okay? Now, with those planets of Venus and Mars there in Virgo, they then slowly, as they move and as other planets move, we had a few different formations happen during October. For you guys that are mutable signs, this fall and winter and all of next year are going to be big years for you, okay? So that means if you're Gemini, if you're Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces, if you've got that on your sun, your moon, or your rising sign, you guys in particular, you will notice that these themes that we're talking about in this video will really apply to you right now to the end of this year, and then it will pick up again around May of next year through the end of next year. The beginning of October, we had Mars being squared by Saturn. This Virgo Mars being squared by Saturn, I think I posted something on Facebook about this and mentioned this is a time when perhaps you'd want to clean out your closets and sort of get organized, whether it's literally or figuratively in your life, depending on where that Saturn was moving through your chart and where that Mars was also located. The transiting Mars and the transiting Saturn, where are they located in your chart? That area of your life would be the thing that you'd probably be wanting to get organized with, throwing out the trash and whatnot. And then we had Mars move so that it was opposite Neptune. Mars opposite Neptune is a time when Mars is your, as a transiting planet, it kind of activates us and pushes us and gets us to do something. It's like a little spark. So this Mars came, and this quick little Mars came and moved opposite Neptune. It can be a time where you sort of don't know what to do with yourself, because how to take action, that spark, that part of you. It was in Virgo opposite Neptune. Neptune is in Pisces. So it can be a time where it's more introspective. Perhaps you were studying things, but it wasn't so that you could directly apply them to something right then. It's a good time, would have been a good time for reading and things like that. I have enjoyed the month, this past month actually. Been doing a lot of research, but it's not really a time. It can be a time where you don't feel like you're being really outwardly productive, so it can be frustrating. And this is in particular, like I said, for those of us who have strong mutable signs in our birth chart. Okay, so after we had these Mars things happening, and these, by the way, transits, you've got to look and see where these transiting planets, which houses they're falling in your chart. You overlay the current planets over your birth chart because it's going to be different for you. The overall themes will be the same. So when I talk about Mars being that desire to get something done and Neptune being this diffuse sort of what it does is it dissolves things that it touches. So when you put Mars opposite Neptune, it just sort of dissolves your resolve to sort of get things done, right? And it brings an element of fantasy. That's why I said it would be a good time to study, sitting in a chair and studying and keeping it all inside of yourself rather than getting up and going and doing something with it, okay? Gives kind of a spiritual, introspective vibe to Mars. Now, but where it falls in your birth chart will show these circumstances in your life that were activated by this transit. Now, after this happened, we then had Venus square Saturn. So Venus is in Virgo. Saturn has just moved into Sagittarius, back into Sagittarius, and is going to stay in Sagittarius now. When this square happened, Venus is pleasure. It's enjoying something, right? It's wherever it's landing in your chart. It's showing where you're sort of having a ease. It's something in your life that you are applying pleasure to, okay? So, for example, it's going through my first house. It's a good time. Through your first house would be a time when you'd like, oh, I don't know, you kind of are lazy, you know, because it's your first house, and you just sort of want to do things that you enjoy doing when Venus is transiting your first house. But with it squaring Saturn, you then sort of no longer are. It's kind of like you wake up one day and you feel like, oh, the thing that I really enjoyed at one point, I can't be bothered with, or the joy is kind of gone. So there was this element this month. We have had this element of the pleasure being sucked out of things a little bit. So luckily, this will be, you know, out of our hair and for the month of November. So let's talk about November. So the main reason I wanted to make this video is to go over this interesting aspect that will be happening. We have a formation between Saturn, which, as I said, has just moved into Sagittarius. Saturn being the planet that has to do with the restrictions, with the right way to do something, with rules. Saturn has to do with the status quo, conservatism, these kinds of things, okay? It's the father. Sagittarius is our zodiac sign that has to do with expansion, with wisdom, with optimism, trying new things, new ventures, risk-taking, gambling. So you put these two together, they don't initially on the face of it kind of go together very well. And how you can see this expressed would be through a certain element of, there can be self-righteousness, there can be thinking that you know the right philosophy for everyone to follow. It can be looking to the past for information about how you should be doing things, from, you know, wisdom from the past, this kind of thing. We'll go over in more detail which house it's moving through for you and what that actually means for you in your life in a practical way. So, and then we've got Saturn squaring Neptune. Neptune is in Pisces. Pisces is Neptune is the planet that rules Pisces. So Neptune being in Pisces is very happy there, so to speak. It means that the transits, it's easier for us astrologers because when transits, when there are formations made with this Neptune, we're only having to synthesize basically one meaning rather than like Saturn and Sagittarius. They have two different meanings. You're blending them together. Neptune in Pisces is, you know, very, very, very simple. And what this is Pisces is anything you can think of that's not the physical world. Okay, that's how, in my mind, how I think of Pisces. So, and it's this spiritual, otherworldly, not cosmic. Like when I think of Uranus, I think of actual other planets that we could, if we had the capability, that we could travel to and be there in the three-dimensional world. Okay, Neptune is like the other dimensions, okay? So it's spiritual and it is otherworldly, it's fantasy, okay? Sci-fi, all this. These are Neptunian things. So it's the dream, it's the fantasy, it's non-reality. Saturn is reality. Saturn is the physical, concrete world that we can walk around in. It's the three-dimensional world. And Neptune is like all the other dimensions, I guess, or something. Everything fifth dimension and up. So when you put these two together, there is this theme of wanting to, of the reality of the situation and the fantasy of the situation being at odds with one another, okay? So us humans, the way it affects us is we feel like what is real and what is illusion in this situation. So you need to look at the houses where these two planets are transiting for you to understand what this means for you. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to go through each of the possible combinations. And bear in mind, for the most part, I mean, I use the Pisces house system, so the houses are different sizes, okay? They're not all the exact same size. So if you use the equal house system, yeah, I don't use the equal house system. So with this, you're going to have to, if the combination doesn't match up for you exactly, so like for example, if I'm like, first house and fourth house, and you have first house with Saturn in the first house and Neptune in the fifth house, just listen to all of the different descriptions, and you can blend it in your own head. So first of all, let's start with a quick explanation. So as I said, Saturn in Sagittarius is about creating structure. That's Saturn. It's about looking at rules, restrictions, boundaries. That's Saturn. It's about the reality of a situation, Saturn. And then it's through this lens that has to do with Sagittarian principles, which would include the law, wisdom, growth, expansion, optimism, these things that I've mentioned already. The teacher, the guru, the guide, these are also Sagittarian themes. Apply these two together and you have these themes of coming to terms with the past, because that's Saturnian. We're looking back to the past, how things were done in the past relative to philosophy, relative to rules, relative to, with Sagittarius, wisdom, the wisdom of the past. And then Sagittarius is very forward-leaning. So it's, okay, what are we going to move into? What is our plan for the future down the road that will allow us to grow and expand as a people, or for you personally, it's where it will fall. So I'm going to use an example. Sagittarius Saturn, this new Saturn, is transiting my 4th house, which is the house of home. When Saturn first moved into my 4th house, it was in Scorpio. And at that time, like within even a couple of weeks, I started working from my house. So that's a literal example of Saturn, which is work, and then moving into my house of home. It's like me working from home, okay? But also, Saturn is not just, the literal keywords and whatnot, right? There's deeper meaning there. So Saturn can also, these transits can bring a feeling. It can bring, sort of brings about, I don't believe in causality. So this is not like the planets are causing you to feel these things. It's that there's a correlation there between the planetary formations, how they affect your birth chart, where they land in your birth chart, rather. And it's just, there's just a correlation between the two. So when Saturn is moving through a house, it's going to bring a tiredness. It's going to bring more work, more burden relative to that house. So when it's moving through, for example, my 4th house of home, I feel like I have a long to-do list that I can never get on top of relative to my house, like chores, things that are going to be broken. One of my kids falls off the bed and hits her head into the door and makes a hole in the door, these kinds of things. It's very coming home and just being at the end of the workday and being tired and having all this other stuff that I still have yet to do. Okay, that's an example of Saturn. But it's also one where you start to get more responsible and you buckle down with things and you're willing to do the work. It's just things kind of move at a slow pace with Saturn. Good thing is it's only in a house for about 2 years, 1.5 to 2 years, maybe longer if you've got a really big house, but not long. So that's good. Then you're going to move on to a new challenge. But with this example, I also at the same time have 7th house Neptune. Of course, Neptune's going to be sitting wherever it's sitting for you for much longer than the Saturn. So the Saturn is kind of coming and doing a little dance with your Neptune. And will be bringing out this Neptune, the 7th house for me, the house of relationships, partnerships, it's everything from the best friend to the marriage partner, has me thinking, what do I want with relationship? I'm not sure. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what my future with relationships is going to look like. Am I going to want to be married again? I don't know. And so when Saturn is moving through the 4th house and they're squaring each other, all of a sudden these two houses are talking to each other. And it's, okay, I don't really know what I want to do as far as marriage and long-term relationship and that kind of thing, but I'm okay with that. And then also, but geez, it would really be nice to have someone to help me with all of these burdens, all the stuff that I have to get done at home, So, and there's a little bit of a square there. There's a little bit of maybe giving up on the dream or the fantasy of this idea of what a relationship could be and just getting very real about, I just need help. I just need a partner. This would be an example of how these two will play out. So I'm going to go ahead and go through all the combinations, and maybe it will help you with getting through this till the end of this year, and then most of next year will be under this same formation. Okay. Overall, this combination of Saturn and Neptune squaring each other, like I said, it's going to be from now until the end of this year, 2015, till the end of December. And then it backs off because we have a retrograde, which is nice. And so then it goes direct again, like the middle of May, I believe. And it's within orb. I mean, they're squaring each other, doing a little dance, kind of, there's little retrogrades that happen and whatnot throughout the summer. And it's there until, I believe, October, I want to say, of next year. So just, a good bulk of next year will be taken up with these themes. So, remember, this is a time where the part of you that wants things to make sense and to have an answer and to be black and white and to be here in the this real place where it's like, oh, okay, it's a leopard purse, I can hold it, you know, whatever. It's like in your hand. And the part of you that understands that everything's illusion. And even though I'm holding this leopard purse, it's actually made of all these atoms and they're not even touching each other. And I could put my hand through it if all of them were vibrating at the same frequency in the same directions. You know, this kind of thing. That's the Neptunian part of you. So it's like these two don't really jive super well together, and it's getting to a place where you can hold them in tension with one another. The paradox of reality and the fantasy. What's going on in my life? What's real? What's fantasy? If it's fantasy in a dream, can I make it real? How can I make it real? Okay, those are the themes that you'll be experiencing. Look at the houses, because that will tell you relative to your life the things that you're experiencing as very real and that are making you feel tired and burned and way down. That's Saturn. And then the part of you, the fantasy part, that's asking questions and what do I want in this area? And what's that going to look like? And how do we make these two things come together to create and manifest this dream in the real 3D world? Okay, if you've got Saturn transiting your first house, you are most likely working on growing up. First house is personality, so Saturn there is asking you to take responsibility for yourself. It's a time of self-development. You could be starting something new in your life. For example, new job, starting a new something at a new school, a new program, these kinds of things. Okay, but it's getting really clear about what it is you want to be taken seriously for. You know, what it is that with your personality, what it is you can do with your life to be a grown-up, all right? Now, probably your Neptune's in your fourth house. It may be in your fifth house, could possibly be in your third house, I suppose. But if it's in your fourth house, this is Neptune, you know, this is the dissolving kind of planet, right? Fourth house is the home. So Neptune here could perhaps have you reflecting back on your childhood home. You could be building your dream home right now. You could be fantasizing about home. You could be kind of experiencing a sense of the elusiveness of home, that it's like you can't ever quite get there. Okay, so these two things together, when I see first and fourth house as kind of a connection, it might be a lot of reflecting back to the childhood, your identity, getting really serious about, okay, you know, maybe this is what I really want. It could actually be a time when you build a house. You know, you could be, okay, it's time to grow up. I'm going to go ahead and get my first mortgage, you know, that kind of thing. Now, if we've got Saturn in the second house, to me, second house is our house of money. Saturn restricts things or puts rules on things. So it could be a time where you have less resources, or where you're budgeting your money better. And I have the whiniest dogs today. So, you know, something with your money, it's not a time where there's a lot of optimism about finances. And when I say that, I say, like, you know, excessive spending. It would be more being conservative with your money, and, you know, knowing that you've got to kind of save up for the long winter ahead kind of a thing, okay? So with this, you would probably have your Neptune in the fifth house. Fifth house is the creative house. It's the house of play, pleasure. It's the Leo house. So Neptune there can be a time where you escape into pleasure. It can be a time where there's a lot of creative daydreaming, but perhaps not a lot of output. You know, that's the problem with Neptune and Pisces, is it can be something that can bring a lot of creative inside mental activity, but there's a breakdown between thinking about it and actually doing it. Okay, so this is why Neptune rules alcohol, marijuana, drugs, and things, because that's how those things can affect you. Okay, now with Neptune there and this second house Saturn, there's a suggestion that perhaps you're realizing, okay, now I need to get serious about my finances. I've been playing, screwing around too much. I need to buckle down and be responsible. Okay, so you could feel a little bit of a money pinch and a little bit of just it's time to pay the piper, so to speak. Okay, Saturn in the third house. Third house is the house of communication, the house of neighbors and siblings, local travel. Saturn here would suggest that there's perhaps you're having to take responsibility for some siblings. That's a possibility. Perhaps you just haven't had contact with siblings. There's a breakdown in communication with the siblings. Perhaps with your communicating, you have more of a desire to introvert and to spend time alone. There's not as much of a desire to be reaching out to others. It's a good time for studying or for writing or for taking time to on your own work through something in your mind, but there is an element of it being somewhat restricted. Mind is a little bit slowed down too. If you're an ADD person all over the place, it's a time where you might be frustrated at that you're thinking more slowly, and you can't do things as quickly as maybe you'd like to. But it's good because it's helping focus you rather than having you be all over the place. Now, when we go ahead and put Neptune, so put Neptune in the 6th house. 6th house is our homework house. It's duties. And Neptune there is kind of an odd placement. I mean, the thing that I really see with this is the spiritual side of Neptune. This desire to, this can be a time where we have health problems because Neptune can dissolve the health. It can cause you to have to be sick. It can also be a time when someone perhaps starts using alcohol or these kinds of things instead to channel it in positive ways like meditation or prayer or escaping, so to speak, these realms through spiritual means that are healthier than through physical substance use. But it's also any kind of escapism, anything you can think of that's pleasurable that you might use to escape could happen with this. Our Saturn, we've got Saturn now in the Saturn in the 4th. Stop. Saturn in the 4th. Oh my gosh. Saturn in the 4th is this is what I've got going on right now. So, like I said earlier, it could be working from home. It could be that your home needs repairs. It could be that you just have to take some responsibility and focus more on your family. It's just sort of a time where you're being called to do the things that maybe you've been putting off, but that are relative to the home and to your family. It can be a time emotionally too that's a little bit depressing. It's the house of the moon. It's Cancer house. And then with this, you're going to have Neptune in the 7th. Neptune in the 7th is a time, like I said, where your relationships and of romantic nature, it's not the element of romance in the relationships, it's the relationships themselves. And it's what you want from relationship, from relating. And you're just going to be kind of unclear on what it is exactly. And there's this element of just kind of letting the universe, so to speak, guide you. You just sort of don't know where you're going. And it can be frustrating for those people who like to have black and white answers to things because there just aren't any during this period of time, which unfortunately is kind of long because it's Neptune. But these two, the way they talk to each other is, like I said earlier, you may be feeling, I really would like a partner to be helping me. It could be a time where your partner is perhaps even either in the home helping you more, if it's more of a stern partner. I can see that with Saturn. You've got a partner who's bringing down the law at home, or it can be that they're missing from home. They're traveling or they're gone, or there's a separation from your partner, and so you have more burdens placed upon you, kind of thing. Saturn in our 5th house. Saturn in the 5th house, 5th house is, like I said earlier, it's the house of play. It's a house of play, and it's a creative house. Saturn in this house can be a time when you feel unloved. It can be a time where you either are actually without a partner, or where it's the sense of feeling unloved, but it's also this other sense of you almost just, it just makes you tired. It makes you tired. You've tried and you're tired, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna, no, I just can't right now. Can't do it, So depending on everything else that's happening in your chart, it can be a time where it's a little like your love life could be a little bit on hold. Your love life could be a little bit slow moving. It's funny because it can be a time, if you're in a relationship that's good, where there's a lot of reevaluating, and is this what I want? Is this the creative, fun, playful relationship, or whatever it is that in your mind that fits your 5th house? Is this working for me? This would then typically it's going to put like I said, your Neptune in the 8th house. Neptune in the 8th house. 8th house is our house of sexuality, our house of death and rebirth. So Neptune in this house is one where a lot of times our sexual energy, our libido, our actual physical libido that's sexually directed, it could be sublimated into a relationship that's perhaps non-physical. It could be sublimated into spiritual practice. There's this element of it like transcending and becoming more spiritual or more removed from the physical. So that could be happening. It can also be a time where you're separated from someone that you love. So Neptune through the 8th is a challenging. I mean, 8th is not an easy house. It's a house of death and rebirth. So you put Neptune, which is the planet of, dissolution, into the house of death and rebirth, and so your bonded, intimate relationships are going to undergo some sort of a interesting. It's like they're going to dissolve. It's like putting sugar in water. Neptune is like this. It is Neptune. Sea, right? It makes us think of the ocean. And the ocean, of course, is made of water, which is our most commonly used solvent here on Earth. I think of all the elements, actually. I think it's just considered the most effective solvent. So more elements can be dissolved in it than anything. So it's like Neptune. Neptune's the same. So it can be that your love life, your sex life, your bonded, intimate sex life actually is not there, it disappears, or it takes on this element of it being, like I said, removed somehow physically from the partner, or it becomes more spiritual. You may become less interested or less focused on like lusty sex and more interested in deep, connected, soulful, relating with another person. So, okay, now with Saturn in the 7th house, yes, am I skipping a house? No, Saturn in the 6th house. 6th house of duties. Daily duties. So Saturn there is not very fun. It's like homework. It's a time when you pay your dues. This is a time when, if you're in some sort of an apprenticeship, it's when you're doing that 2 years of apprenticeship work. If you're in school, it's same thing. You're getting ready to move on to this next phase of your life, but you've got to do this homework first. Okay, not super fun. But it's in Virgo, so it's in a place where it's I'm sorry, Virgo, Sagittarius. So it's Saturn in Sagittarius is very happy in a sense in this 6th house, because there's an optimism and expansion there. It's like you've got this plan down the road that you're working towards, so you just have to kind of work your plan. Let's say this is going to put the Neptune most likely in the 9th house, could be in the 10th house, like I said, or the 8th, depending on your chart. But 9th house Neptune, 9th house is our house of higher education, wisdom, and in particular, it's the wisdom of the collective that belongs outside the community, the culture you grew up within. So this is other cultures, other countries, foreign countries, other religions. This is the house that has to do with philosophy, college, higher education. So the teacher, the guru, the guide. So you put Neptune there. Neptune is the part of us that asks those big questions. Why, who, where, what, what is this? Who am I? In the 9th house, it says, what is my philosophy? What do I believe? What is my religion? What's the foundation that I've built my life upon? What's the wisdom? It's a very existential placement for Neptune. 12th house is even more so, but 9th house is from sort of a cerebral, just asking these questions and not really having satisfying answers. That's the problem with Neptune, is like lots of questions, lots of open-endedness, not a lot of answers. And so we will struggle and try and find answers, hopefully learn what it is we're supposed to learn from Neptune and figure out the answers for ourselves. This is also a time where you might let go of previous religious or philosophical beliefs and opt instead for your own sort of intuitive leanings. It can be a time where people are learning through nature, through ethnogenics, through the things that we have been given here just as being organisms that are part of this earth. So it's like these natural. So rather than other human beings even, it can be learning through natural means, okay? Okay, Saturn through the 7th. If you've got this transing Saturn in the 7th for you till the end of this year and most of next year. Saturn in the 7th house is a house of relationships. This is a time when we either, if we're in a relationship, the relationship may end. Or it could be a time where the relationship takes on sort of a layer of reality, It's like you can see all the warts. And so it's a time that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, if you're in a committed relationship, it can be a period of time that's a little bit focusing on duty and focusing on, the commitment and sticking it out and these kinds of things. So it's not a super exciting place to have Saturn, I suppose. It can be a time when you break up. If you've got some other Mars transits happening, I mean, that would activate and depending on like the ruler of your 7th house and I can see somebody, if you had just the right thing happen, if perhaps their seventh house, you know, was in a placement where Mars came and hit that ruler of the seventh house at the same time that Saturn sort of swooped in there. I can see the end of a relationship happening if the person is unsatisfied. So that could be a trigger. But it's just a time where you take inventory on the relationship. You want to figure out. And by the way, it's not necessarily the relationship you're in, it's just relationship in general, okay? The relationship you're in, you're going to reflect that, or you're going to look at the relationship and you're going to compare it to where you're at in your own head. But your attitude towards relationships will take on perhaps a little more of a serious tone. There might even be a sense, again, this sense of tiredness, like, I'm just tired. I just don't want to bother with it right now. Saturn will feel, it feels like burden, so the house it's moving through may feel a little bit burdensome to you because you're called to be responsible, okay? This is going to put Neptune in your 10th house. Neptune in the 10th house, house of career, the house of status, the top of the chart. This can be a time when we sort of lose interest in how we appear to the outside world. From a material standpoint, if you're someone who's pretty materialistic, you may be a little less interested and less worried about how people sort of see you. Neptune in this house, would have followed a period of time when you had it in the 9th house, of course, which would have been a period where you came to a place of wisdom of your own. So you might then, with your career, if you've been in the middle of a career that's been unsatisfying for you, it's a time when you finally have kind of the courage and the inner intuitive knowingness that you may know it's time to move on. And there's a creativity and a fantasy element that comes as well with Neptune. So you have to be careful that you're not deluding yourself or throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But it is a time where with work and career, there's this element that's a little bit, you're a little bit removed in a sense. And you might be interested in also, you could also even take the spiritual. You could say maybe you start doing something that is involved where you're involved on a spiritual path relative to work, like you start doing something where you're helping others spiritually through work. That could happen as well. The way that these two will sort of play out, though, between each other, it's the house of one's Saturn in the house of relationship, and then this 10th house of career. There could be issues that come up, maybe the partnership that you have at work, if you have a business partner. Maybe you've got something with your romantic partner, and their issues with work is taking you away from your partnership, and so you're having to sort of let work go a little bit to focus working on the partnership, that kind of thing. All right. If we move Saturn into, where are we, 8th house? Yeah. Saturn in the 8th house is not the most exciting placement, right? This is the father, and the 8th house is the bedroom. We don't really want the father in the bedroom, So this is the critical father. There's this restriction to, a lot of times, to your actual physical desire. It can be a time also, though, where, again, Saturn gives this loneliness. It has a loneliness to it. There's a quality to it where it's the hermit. So even if it's welcomed, even if you want to be alone, there's still this sense of aloneness. And so in the 8th house, which is the house of intense bonded relating with others, that's probably going to be somewhat restricted in your life. So even if you're in a long-term relationship, as I said before, it could be a time where sexually things are cooling off a little bit, or if there had been issues of I don't know, let's say you've got a partner that's really jealous. It could be a time where that could kind of come to a head, and you're sort of having to look at and face the things in the relationship that aren't great. Saturn just kind of doesn't put up with things that he doesn't want to put up with. So it could be a time where you, again, sort of clean things up, death and rebirth, get rid of a partner if it's not working properly. But it can also just be a time where you have more of, like, I can also see it being a time where, because Saturn's a malefic, I can see him bringing a partner who's like jealous and restricting and controlling and domineering into your life as well. So those themes could be an issue. This is going to, most likely, this will put your Neptune in your 11th house. 11th house is the house of your broader associations, friends. It's our hope and our goals. Having Neptune there is one where, perhaps with our friendships and whatnot, we might join like a new agey group, or we might be interested in the oneness of the collective of all of us, as part of mankind. There could be sort of these two things are it's kind of would be more in the head in a way. I mean, could be you getting involved in your community spiritually. Okay, Saturn in the ninth. If Saturn is transiting your ninth house, this might be a time for you into this year and most of next year where you are being called upon to be a teacher, a guru, a guide, okay, an expert of some kind, where you'll be teaching, you'll be operating in this role of teaching. You could be mentoring somebody. You could be, it could be a time with your religion even as well, where whether you're volunteering through your religion, teaching, through your church, or where you yourself are reflecting upon the things that you have been taught, and you're trying to sort of create a system that works for you. It's a time where Saturn wants us to become clear about things. There's a discernment to Saturnian time. So through the ninth house of philosophy and religion and wisdom, we are trying to sort of get really clear about what it is that we believe. And there can be kind of a self-righteous element a little bit to Saturn in this house. And because we've got Saturn in Sagittarius, that's what this house is, there definitely is this element of you could become dogmatic during this period of time, looking for sort of the answers that like black, it's like a little bit black and white, just these are the answers, and this is what I'm sticking to, and it can be a little stubborn like that. So this is a time when it's a great time to reflect back on the things you were taught when you were younger and to compare them and contrast them with where you're at as an adult, and let go of the things that are not working for you. So you will then have Neptune in the 12th house, most likely. Neptune in the 12th house, if you're experiencing this transit right now, wow, I mean, these are the big existential questions. So you are going to be asking, who am I? Why am I here? Why are we here? What is this all about? And being without answers, which can then lead a human to that place of the existential crisis, right? Where it's just like, okay, just never mind. And then the escapism can kind of happen, which is why you can see people on the shadow side of this transit through the 12th house that escape through drugs or alcohol or any other type of addictive behavior. Or you can see them go on the higher side where they become more compassionate and open and flowing with life, with not knowing the answers. They become more spiritual, interested in the oneness between everything and everyone, and perhaps they start a new modality of spirituality that works for them, that's very intuitive. It's also really a time of intense unconscious sort of unearthing and having sometimes even this fuzzy boundary between reality and illusion and fantasy and these kinds of things. So it can feel sort of ungrounded. I mean, depends on the rest of your chart, but that 12th house with the 9th house, they go together really nicely because these are both dealing with issues of knowledge and learning and asking the big questions. Sagittarius and Pisces both ask all the big questions. So, and they're mutable, so they don't necessarily have an answer. So it can be a little uncomfortable to be experiencing this, but it's a time for, you're coming to your own answers. So Saturn in the 9th is looking at the answers you grew up with. Neptune in the 12th is saying, okay, well, what does spirit or the universe or whatever you want to call the big, great, what is that we're a part of, what is it telling me that the answers are? What do I believe that the answers are? Okay, that would be themes for you. Saturn in the 10th house. The 10th house is career. Saturn is the natural ruler of this house because this is the Capricorn house. So Saturn's happy there. Now remember, this is going to be an area in your life where you're working more, where you may feel tired, where you feel more burdened. So Saturn there could be with your job. You might get a promotion. You might become you're a manager now or whatever. You've got a job where there's an element of you being a leader or your expertise is being called upon. So it's going to require more work from you. If you own your own business, perhaps it's a time when you're gearing up and planning for an expansion. It's a time when it's a time of work. It's where you're working. A lot of work is being applied in the area of career and status. It is a time you can take yourself a little too seriously. Saturn at the top of your chart. You can take your own ego, the way you look to the outer world a little too seriously during this period of time. And it can be a time too, because Saturn is restrictive, it could be a time as well where you could feel stuck with work, with career. and wanting to get a better idea about where you're wanting to head next. So this was going to place most likely Neptune in your first house of identity. So it's a tough one because it's like you yourself having Neptune in the first house, it does give you a sort of a compassion. It's going to bring out your compassion, your desire to love everyone and to serve others. You know, Neptune's this Jesus, it's this like Christed energy. So you may see yourself move into this period of your life where you are more loving, but you could also feel kind of spacey, a little bit unsure of who you are, and there can be big identity changes when you have Neptune in the first, so you may look outward, outside of yourself, for that external, what do they call it, the external frame of reference, where you, through a partner or through your job, because that 10th house connection with Saturn, maybe next year, maybe you work and focus on your job and your career to sort of validate who you are, or to give your life meaning and purpose, but, you know, it's for you to decide if that's working or not. So this can be a little tricky, right? It's hard when you're looking for a mirror to see yourself clearly through, but really that doesn't exist. You're the only one who can see you clearly, if that makes any sense. So it's a little bit of a tricky transit. Next one, Saturn in the 11th house, house of friendships, associations. You may be called upon to be responsible. So, hey, oh, can you be the president of the PTA? You know, this kind of thing. Can you... I mean, lead up this meetup group. You could be called upon to also, actually not called upon, you might be someone really social. And when Saturn moves into your 11th house, you may sort of take a couple of years to sort of back off a little bit and spend a little bit more solo time, hermiting, doing your own thing, and not necessarily in the social mix. And it could be because you're busy with work. It could be because you've got your own things kind of going on, and socializing and that outer world's not really part of the plan so much. And so you could even be taking on a role where you're working. When I had Saturn go through my 11th house, it was when I started my business, my online business. And so I was dealing with all these people online and socializing in a sense with them, but doing it all by myself behind a laptop, you know, computer screen at my house by myself. So that kind of combination of sort of themes, I suppose, could happen for you. This would put Neptune into your second house, most likely. Neptune in the second house. Second house is the house of money. So this is your resources, your finances, your wealth. It can be a time where you lose money, like where money dissolves, like you thought you had money and it's like not there. That can happen. It can also be a time where if you also, just like the 10th house, where your materialism and the value of material goods, they sort of fall away, and you start seeing the value in the things that really matter, which would be, you know, in my mind, love and people, the people in your life, and the things you can teach one another. So these themes of perhaps, you know, just money, not worrying so much about money and worrying about the things that really matter could be highlighted for you. Saturn in the 12th is kind of like Saturn in the 9th. They're sort of similar in a way. Saturn wants to make things real. It wants to have a codified system. It wants to have rules. It wants to understand that everything's correlated, you know, that it all makes sense. It has a plan and it's going somewhere, okay? You put Saturn in the 12th house. 12th house is not about that. 12th house is about, like, there's a plan, yes, and it's all this one thing, and it's chaotic, but in the chaos, it's organized, you know? So you might be looking for a new religion. You might be looking for a new belief system. You might have this desire to figure out mysteries that you, you know, have never been interested in before. Or it's a time where it's quite introspective as well. Again, it is a time of hermiting for sure. A time where you may just need to spend time alone. And after moving out of that 11th house, which it would have been in, you know, right before, you know, can be a little bit of a lonely period in your life for some people. But it's also a time when you can get into a habit of connecting with God or spirit or whatever you call your, you know, going out into nature, if that's your thing, whatever. So this is going to put that Neptune in the 3rd house. Neptune in the 3rd house, house of communication. We can have very much, it's a time where we can feel spacey, okay? If you're someone who's always been really sharp and mentally active and aware, it can be a time where that part of us starts to lean towards more fantastical ways of thinking, I suppose, or we just kind of, these questions of illusion and reality. And so these two houses, I like this kind of combination though, because it is a time that's pretty spiritual. And so it would be a time where it's like you have a direct connect to God, you know, where you're more open to communicating with entities or beings that are perhaps not ones that we can see here with our eyeballs. Thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful, and leave me questions. Let me know how this has been affecting you. I'm really curious to hear about your Saturn-Neptune, this Saturn-Neptune square in your chart. Okay, bye. Have a good one.